A suburban boarding house, an old shaman lady whose home was filled with paper figures, and long nights where shadows came to life. We thought it was just a few silly superstitions until the stiff paper effigies in the storage room began to walk, to knock on each door, to seek out the very people whose blood had accidentally stained them. From then on, the boarding house plunged into the sound of footsteps clattering on the tiled roof, white figures creeping along the corridors, and half-human, half-paper faces peeking through windows to whisper names. And when the paper figure gained half a real face, it returned to claim what was its. The student's escape ended with a horrifying truth. The one being burned was not a paper figure, but the very person whose soul had been swapped the night before. I was a student at a technical college located in the suburbs. After struggling to salvage the last bits of knowledge from my first year's second semester, I failed 5 subjects and naturally accumulated a lot of debt. Monetary debt could be repaid with money, but academic debt like mine required a great deal of money, effort, and many nights of hard work to compensate for months of slacking off. I shared a room with a friend named Tom. Tom was in a different class than me, but by some twist of fate, we ended up living together. At first, we rented a room in the house of an old shaman, Madame Mean. She was quite elderly, with one eye blind. She looked exactly like the old ghosts my villagers used to scare children with. The pupil of her damaged eye was covered by a cloudy, grayish-white film. Many people came to Madame Mean for consultations. Sometimes young women came to sever unlucky karmic ties. Other times mothers brought their children to learn about their future fortunes. There were even entire families arriving in cars to consult on house directions, grave disturbances, serial deaths in the family, or auspicious times for conception to ensure a son. In short, there was nothing she couldn't read. When we first moved in, we were a little scared of her, but over time, I found her to be kind, speaking softly. Most of the students here came from difficult backgrounds. The rent was quite cheap, only 600,000 VND a month, with utilities priced like a local residence. The only catch was that if I came home late at night and saw her emerge from her dimly lit tiled house, I'd always jump. I was easily startled and imagined ghosts everywhere. Madame Mean had a small house right next to my room, used exclusively for making votive offerings. Whenever she was free, she would bring out bamboo strips, papier mâche, and glue to make her wares. She was quite skilled, crafting paper horses, elephants, hats, and fans. One afternoon, when I skipped class, I sat by the door watching her work. I saw her making a male paper figure, dressed in a black fabric shirt and a turban. Its cheeks were adorned with pink paper, its lips red, and its eyes drawn large but completely soulless. Suddenly, I felt a strange fear of that paper figure. There was something peculiar about it. My room was flanked on the right by the votive offerings house, and on the left by a newly moved-in family. The husband worked as a motorbike taxi driver, and the wife stayed home to look after their 3-year-old son. The little boy cried often in the middle of the night. Since they moved in, he cried every single day. One day, Tom went back to his hometown, and I stayed alone in our room. It was late at night, and I was lying awake, worrying about the soaring tuition fees I had to shoulder because of my failed subjects. Suddenly, the baby next door started crying, wailing as if someone was teasing him. Outside, the entire neighborhood was silent. Only my room, being next to the child's, could hear the drawn-out cries. Already annoyed, and having heard the baby cry for days, I decided to go over and suggest they do something about it. But then I heard a voice. It was the old shaman lady. "Hey, you two, has the little boy been crying like this for long?" "Yes, madam. Ever since his mother passed away in our hometown 3 months ago, he's been crying constantly." "That explains it. Listen closely. You should pack up and leave because the mother of you two is following the boy." "How did she die? I don't know for sure. But I see her limping, like a cripple, looking pale and still calling out to the boy from outside the gate." "Madam, how did you know? My wife was hit by a drunk driver and broke her leg. We thought it was just a cast, but somehow she fell into a coma. 3 weeks later, she passed away." "That's right. Your wife's age aligns with this little boy's. It seems she wants to take him, that's why she's teasing him until he cries." I pressed my ear against the door, eavesdropping on the conversation between the motorbike taxi driver and Madame Mean. I thought, could it really be true? How else could she be so accurate? I peeked my head out the window. The two of them were still talking. My eyes scanned towards the main gate. Oh my God, I imagined an old woman, thin, with dangling, broken-looking legs, hair like straw. She was sitting on the gate, baring black teeth, waving at the little boy. Just thinking about it scared me to death, and I scurried back inside. Then there were rustling sounds from the votive offerings room next door, followed by the squeaking of a swarm of rats fighting. I leapt onto my bed and pulled the blanket over me, my teeth chattering. Outside, Madame Mine coughed a few times. The sound of shuffling sandals faded as she walked back towards her tiled house. I don't know if it was to save electricity, but her house was always pitch black, except for the tiny red light bulb on her altar. I wouldn't sleep in a house that dark with only that eerie red light for all the money in the world. The next day, I saw the couple preparing an offering table outside their door with sticky rice, porridge, glutinous rice, wine, and fruit. Madame Mine brought out 2 sets of paper clothes and a handful of votive money, spreading a mat in front of the door. She tossed 2 coins onto a plate, what people call asking for divination. She tossed them 3 or 4 times, but they never landed correctly. So Madame Mine took some glutinous rice, sprinkled it towards the gate, and performed another ritual. After everything was done, she told the motorbike taxi driver and his wife to go home immediately, pack their belongings, and take their child. If they met an old man striking a gong at the entrance of their village, the child would be safe. But if they met an old woman selling rice crackers, the family had to be careful. And so, they packed up and left. We never saw them again after that day. Most of their belongings were gone, leaving only an empty room. One day, I asked Madame Mine if the motorbike taxi driver's family had moved. She simply said they all died. She supposed they must have met the old woman selling rice crackers on their way home. I didn't fully understand, but I guessed that meeting someone of the gong striker's age was auspicious, turning bad luck into good, whereas meeting someone of the rice cracker seller's age was inauspicious. Madame Mine probably knew this, but simply let fate take its course. One day, my room was opposite Lily's room. Lily was a first-year student, younger than me. She was quite pretty and lived with her older sister, Sarah, who was 5 years my senior and worked in marketing. Sarah had a habit of coming home late. That day, Madame Mine was picked up by someone in a car. I don't know where she went. She hadn't returned by evening. Her house was locked and pitch black, like a haunted house. Lily's sister usually came home from work between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. That day, as usual, I heard the sound of a motorbike, then the gate opening, then the sound of the bike being wheeled inside. I assumed it was Sarah coming home from work. That evening, only my room and Lily's room were occupied, as the other 3 rooms were empty, their occupants having gone back to their hometowns. As I listened, I heard the motorbike crash to the ground with a thud, and then Sarah screamed loudly from outside. "Ghost, Lily, help me." Tom and I opened our door and ran out. We saw Sarah pinned under her fallen motorbike. Tom rushed to lift the bike while I helped her up. Lily also ran out and helped her sister to sit on the doorstep. I asked, "Sister, what happened?" Her face was ashen, her mouth stammering, unable to form a coherent sentence. Her voice still trembled with shock. She sat on a chair, turned on her yellow study lamp, and closed the door. Tom and I also sat down, eager to hear her story. She said that as she was wheeling her motorbike near her room, she saw someone walk out of the votive offerings house and into the yard. At first, she thought it was Madame Mine, the landlady. But then she noticed the figure was tall and walked strangely, like an old man leaning on a walking stick. Gradually, this figure became whiter and faded, but its posture and clothes resembled an ancient mandarin, dressed in the old ways. Sarah was so scared she dropped her bike. When she fell and couldn't get up with the bike pinning her leg, the figure darted in front of her, squatted down, and bared its teeth in a wide, eerie grin. That's when she started screaming for help. I don't know if she really saw a ghost or was just so panicked that she mistook a hen for a phoenix. But after hearing her story, I felt a shiver and pulled Tom back into our room. Both of us were so scared we nearly wet ourselves, neither daring to go out to the restroom. Eventually, I really needed to go. I asked Tom, "Do you need to pee?" His face was as wrinkled as a monkey's bottom, so he probably needed to go badly too. He nodded, so the 2 of us snuck out to the communal restroom. The path required us to pass Madame Mine's house to get to the restrooms and showers. Just as we were about to reach it, 2 heads popped out of the women's restroom. Tom and I almost peed our pants, but it was Lily and Sarah. Turns out they were also scared and didn't dare to go alone, so they had to go together. We just forced a laugh and quickly did our business. That night, I dreamt that someone was lurking outside my door. In my dream, I opened my eyes and looked out. The door, which had been closed, suddenly swung open. Then a head peered in and looked at me. I realized that the one peering in was no one but the paper figure I had seen earlier. Still with its pink cheeks, soulless eyes, and clothes drawn on papier mâche, but this time it was smiling a paper figure that knew how to smile. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. I looked at the door and it was still closed. So I stayed awake until morning, unable to sleep anymore. When I woke up the next morning, my eyes were deeply shadowed. Tom asked, "Are you too scared to sleep because of the ghost?" "No, I was studying," I lied. "Studying? You only study if it's with Lily, that's when you study." He was right, I only studied when I was with Lily. Speaking of Lily's room, I don't know if Sarah was too scared or what, but she brought her boyfriend, David, to sleep over. David was tall and thin, wearing glasses, looking quite intellectual. When he slept over, Sarah spread a mat for him on the floor, stringing a mosquito net around some nails on the wall, while Lily and Sarah slept on the bed. That was the first night David slept there. I don't know if he was superstitious or just scared of ghosts, but he kept a cleaver under his pillow for safety. Normally nothing happened, but with him there, something did. I hadn't slept yet because I was working on a project for my class. Tom and I heard screams and cries from next door. Tom and I ran over and knocked on their door. After a while, Lily came out to open it. I reached in and turned on the light, and the scene before my eyes made me a bit squeamish. David stood inside the mosquito net, holding the cleaver, his face pale, drenched in sweat. I didn't understand what was happening, but David threw the knife to the ground and crawled out. Sarah sat on the bed, still sobbing, while Lily's face still held a hint of shock. A moment later, Sarah explained what had happened. There was no argument or anything, just this. David was sleeping soundly on the floor when he saw a woman walking around the room, pouring water to drink. Then he saw the person walk over to where he was lying and crawl her head inside the mosquito net. At first, he thought it was Sarah, intending to sleep with him, but then he noticed it wasn't her, the figure wasn't as skinny, and her hair wasn't that long. After only a few minutes, when the person poked her head inside, he saw a woman's face with only the outline of her features, but no eyes, nose, or mouth. He immediately pulled out the knife, waving it around, slashing at the air and screaming, which woke Sarah and Lily. Imagine a man holding a knife, screaming and slashing like mad in the middle of the night who wouldn't be terrified. So the two sisters started screaming too. The man, hearing their screams, became even more panicked and slashed more wildly. In reality, he was only trying to hack at the ghost. If I were to talk about the ghosts in Madame Mean's house, I could go on all day. One afternoon, when Madame Mean was home, I told her about Sarah encountering the old man with the walking stick in the yard. I asked, "How can you be a shaman, yet your property is full of so many ghosts?" She replied, "If the ghosts are on my land, where else would they be but in my house? And I'm a shaman, not a sorcerer who catches ghosts or banishes demons. I only read fortunes, ward off bad luck, or advise on land and house directions. I don't know how to catch ghosts. Sometimes I can sense and see them, but not often." "So, who is that old man with the walking stick, madam?" I asked. "Ah, that's probably the spirit of my late grandfather. He always had a habit of using a walking stick and wore traditional dark clothes, so it must be him. He's not a malevolent ghost. He just walks around the yard, and if a timid person happens to meet him, they get scared." "And the woman who crawled into David's mosquito net, who was she, madam?" "I'm not sure about that one. My land used to be part of a burial ground, so there are many people here whose stories I don't know completely. There are new ghosts and old ghosts, perhaps even spirits of soldiers who died in battle. But you can't banish them. If it's like this, who would dare to live here?" "I already told you, I only know how to perform rituals and tell fortunes. As for banishing ghosts and demons, that's a different kind of skill, and I don't possess it." Then came a day when I encountered a ghost myself. It was a moonlit night. I had already fallen asleep when I heard the sound of horse hooves outside. Indeed, there was the sound of hooves. I didn't know who would bring a horse here. I quietly opened the door a crack and peered out. I saw someone riding a horse around the yard. How strange, who could bring a horse in here, but it was very odd. The rider sat perfectly still on the horse's back, and the horse just circled the yard. I opened the door and asked, "Who are you bringing a horse in here? It's late." The person on the horse turned to look at me. It was then that I realized there was no person at all. It was just a paper figure, a paper horse, moving around in the yard. Then, the paper figure suddenly jumped off the horse. It ran towards me, stood in front of me, swaying as if enjoying something, and let out a laugh. I distinctly heard laughter, but the paper figure's mouth didn't move. Then it grabbed my arm. I was so startled that I kicked it. Its entire body detached and fell to the ground, leaving only the bamboo arm still gripping my hand. The horse neighed and charged straight at me. I ran back into my room, slammed the door shut, and heard banging outside. "Give me back my hand, give me back my hand." It turned out I had carried the paper arm into the house. I secretly opened the window and threw the arm out, hearing only the paper figure's shrill laugh. The laughter was neither male nor female, neither childish nor adult. Then I collapsed to the floor, breathless. Good heavens, paper figures from the votive offerings storage and paper horses could walk. If I told anyone this, my friends would surely call me crazy. I was already on the verge of madness. Maybe I needed to see a doctor. What if I was hallucinating? That's what I thought at the time. The next morning, I went to knock on Madame Mean's door, wanting to ask if she knew about the walking paper figures in the storage room, but she didn't answer. Where had the old lady gone? I knocked and knocked, but she was nowhere to be found. Just as I was about to give up and leave, Madame Mean spoke from behind me. I jumped. I asked, "Oh, madam, you scared me half to death." "What's wrong, child? Did you see ghosts again?" "Yes, I did. Yesterday, I saw your paper figure and the horse come out of the storage room and walk around the yard." Madame Mean didn't speak for a moment. Then she told me, "You must have been dreaming. I've been in this business, selling votive offerings since I was a young girl. Where would a paper figure that can walk, stand, and laugh come from? If there are ghosts, they're from somewhere else. There are none here." I insisted that I was wide awake at the time, but the old lady still dismissed it. I didn't know how to explain, so I kept silent. I discussed moving to another boarding house with Tom. It was cheap here, but there were too many ghostly occurrences. Tom disagreed because he had never encountered a ghost before. Perhaps he was less timid than me. He heard my stories but didn't know if they were real, so he refused to leave. Besides, where else could we find such an affordable, comfortable place with an easygoing landlady like Madame Mean? And we had only been here for 2 months. Moving again would be a hassle. "Lily isn't even scared. Why should we, as men, be scared?" he argued. Hearing him challenge my masculinity like that, I relented. It would be cowardly for 2 men to run away. So, I stayed. But then, one day, Tom himself had an encounter. Tom took his shower late that day, around 10 p.m., carrying his bucket out to the bathroom. He told me that as he was filling his bucket with water, he heard sounds of someone scooping water from the well outside the door. The communal bathroom had a rather large, ancient well, with green moss growing on its blue stone sides, typical of old times. I guess the well was very old because there were some Chinese characters carved on it. Tom heard someone drawing water, so he called out, "Who's bathing so late? You'll catch a cold showering with cold well water this late." No one answered his question, but someone splashed a bucket of cold water right through the wooden door, directly onto Tom's face. Annoyed by the excessive teasing, he decided to open the door and see who it was. He saw a pair of paper shoes lying by the edge of the well. He picked them up, looked around, but saw no one. He wondered if it was me playing a prank. As he pondered, he looked down into the well. He was startled because his reflection in the water not only showed himself but also a paper figure standing beside him. But when he turned around, there was nothing there. The paper shoes he had just held in his hand were also gone. Tom quickly grabbed his clothes and ran straight back to our room. That night, I saw him keep his study lamp on all night, not daring to sleep. He lay there, recounting his ghostly experience to me, the paper figure. So both of us had now seen the paper figure ghost. This meant we weren't hallucinating at all. I began to doubt Madame Mean. I started to spy on her, trying to see what she did in that dark house. I knew snooping was wrong, but she had such a strange attitude when I mentioned the paper figures moving in the storage room. Ghost stories often overly deify shamans and sorcerers, portraying them as battling demons in the clouds. But this old lady, I observed that she could only sense the presence of spiritual entities or omens, and her rituals and fortune-telling were all learned from inherited books, not actual demon-catching magic as I often heard about. Basically, she was a very ordinary person, as far as I could tell at the time. One day, Madame Mien went out. It seemed the door was only latched, not locked. I watched her leave, and after she was completely gone, I snuck inside. Inside, there was a small bed. The house was quite cool, even a bit chilly. On the altar were many fruits, candies, and large coils of incense hanging above. Below, there was an incense bowl packed with countless incense sticks, forming a large mound. It felt like a slight breeze would cause all these incense sticks to fall and scatter throughout the house. I noticed a statue of a small child, belly exposed, standing in the middle of the altar. Above it were photos of several old people and a slightly blurred black and white image of a young man. I felt the eyes in the photos on the altar scrutinizing me. Then I looked up at the two roof beams. I startled and fell back. It was nothing, just two paper, Thung Liuang figures wrapped around the pillars for decoration. The house had another room. It was pitch black inside, the entrance covered by a windscreen so I couldn't see anything within. As I was intently observing, I heard Madame Mien outside, accompanied by another woman. I panicked, not daring to run out because the old lady was already in the yard. If I ran out, it would look suspicious, and she might accuse me of theft, which would be terrible. She was about to enter the house, so I didn't know where to go and immediately dove into the inner room. Just as I pushed aside the windscreen, I almost screamed. Inside, there were many figures standing in rows like an army. It was dark, so I couldn't see clearly. When I got closer and touched them, I realized they were all made of paper. They were paper figures, not real people. How could anyone live with such weird things in their house? I thought. I saw a pile of sedge mats in the corner. I quietly squeezed into the corner, covering myself with a few mats to hide completely. At the same time, the old lady came inside. The customer she was with sat outside for her fortune reading, not coming in. A little later, the customer left and Madame Mien slowly walked into the inner room. She held a knife in her hand. Oh no, I thought. The old lady must have found me and was going to use the knife on me. I thought about kicking aside the mats and running, but then I hesitated. What if, as I ran, those paper figures started moving and grabbed me? My life would be over, so I stayed absolutely still, trying to breathe as lightly as possible. Madame Mien walked closer to the pile of mats. I was certain she knew I was there, but no, she picked up one of the paper figures, placed it on the floor, and brought out her paints. More horrifyingly, she cut 10 small fingernails into the bowl of paint, then stirred them together. Finally, she stuck 3 incense sticks into a small altar on the ground. She chanted softly, murmuring her name, I am Tathai Mien. And after each phrase, she would make a shhh sound, like our elders do when praying to ancestors on death anniversaries. Hidden in the pile of mats, I couldn't hear clearly. Then she took the blood-mixed paint and drew a face on the paper figure on the ground. I held my breath, watching this bizarre ritual unfold, when I heard someone call from outside, Madam, why is there no water outside? Madame Mien placed the paper figure down and went outside. The room was again covered by the windscreen, plunging into darkness. I crawled out, planning to sneak out while the old lady wasn't paying attention, when suddenly, the paper figure on the ground lunged up and grabbed my leg. The other figures that had been standing still also crowded around, trying to strangle me. These flimsy bamboo and paper objects should have been easily brushed aside. But why did they possess the strength of flesh and blood bodies? It pressed me to the ground. In my panic, I grabbed the bowl of paint and splattered it all over them. The one on the ground still held my leg tightly. I struggled and finally broke free, but my leg was bleeding. I ran outside. Madame Mien was nowhere to be seen. The boarding house was empty at that moment. I immediately ran to the market. I was afraid to be alone in the house, and I also tried to make it look like I wasn't there, so that if Madame Mien returned and saw the mess, she would know someone had broken in. I lingered at the market for an hour, then went to an internet cafe to play games for a while longer. I timed it so that the boarding house would be bustling with people returning from work and school, especially Tom, who would also be back from his part-time job by then. I pretended to be carrying some vegetables and meat home. As soon as I reached the gate, I ran into the old lady. I feigned a cheerful greeting, kept a bright face, and walked in as if nothing had happened. I guessed she didn't suspect me, but she seemed to be staring intently at my leg. I then remembered my leg was bleeding from the paper figure's attack. Later that day, while I was studying, Madame Mien knocked on my door, calling me outside. I was terribly uneasy, filled with a sense of dread. I was afraid she knew I had entered her house. She would surely scold me for being a thief or make a big fuss and curse me out. That would be a terrible reputation. But how could I avoid her? I reluctantly went out and opened the door. However, contrary to my fears, Madame Mine calmly asked me, "You went into my house today, didn't you?" I stammered, I just wanted to see the paper figures. I had no intention of stealing anything. It's just that I told you, and you didn't believe me." "I know," she said, "but you went in there. Now the paper figure has hurt you. It's stained with your blood. It will haunt you, you know. It's my son. My son died young. I'm alone, so I often call his soul back to possess a paper figure so he can experience walking around like a living person on Earth. Today, I was performing a ritual when I had to attend to something. Those paper figures standing in rows are the yin soldiers. When I returned, I saw the paper figure on the ground was gone. When a soul is put into a paper figure, you must never let another person's blood touch it. This type of bamboo grows in places with many graves or where many people died in war, so this bamboo makes paper figures very spiritual. They are used to train yin soldiers, but if you're not careful, it's very easy for the paper figures to become demons. The suburban area where we live and study is like a village in my hometown, not as bustling as the city. So if the paper figure ghost escapes from my house, it can hide anywhere or even harm people. I asked Madame Mine if there was any way to catch it or find it. She gave me an answer that sent chills down my spine. No need to find it. It will find you. Now, I'll give you a bowl of paint. Secretly paint all the doors of the boarding house, but you must prick your 10 toes and mix your blood into it. It will hurt a lot, madam, but what's it for? It's so it won't know which room you're in because every room will have your blood. But it's best if you don't stay in your room tonight. You and Tom should go sleep in someone else's room. Don't try to run away. You can't escape. The farther you go, the harder it will be for me to catch it. That night, I secretly went to Lily's room to ask for a place to sleep. Tom teased me, saying, "You're so clever in my hometown, they'd have made you chew ginger by now." Yet Lily and Sarah were captivated by my paper figure story. Although it sounded fantastical and hard to believe, Tom's confirmation made the two sisters trust us completely. They had no choice but to believe, as we weren't just making up excuses to ask for a place to sleep. That night at 12 a.m., the electricity was out. A heavy dew fell, and the yard looked as if covered by a faint, drifting layer of smoke. I heard footsteps on the tiled roof of the boarding house, the rattling of cracking tiles. All four of us held our breath in the room, not daring to make a sound. Then came a thud, like someone jumping from the roof. I cautiously pressed my face against the gap in the window, looking out into the yard. Indeed, a paper figure wearing white paper clothes. Only this paper figure now had a head of hair growing on it. If a paper figure could grow hair, it could also grow limbs, a mouth, and more. Who knew, maybe it could even transform into a human. The paper figure in the yard slowly took stiff, clumsy steps. It pressed one side of its face against the door of each room, as if trying to eavesdrop. Then it knocked on the door 3 times. I saw its every gesture, every action. I watched intently, wondering what on earth it was going to do. It went to the door of each room on the left side of the boarding house, listened, then knocked again. Then I saw it stand in front of my room's door, listening, and then knocking. But this time, it lingered longer in front of my room's door. My room door slowly opened. I saw it walk inside. Phew, if I had been in my room tonight, I don't know what would have happened. Then I saw it walk out, and in a flash, it was gone. I let out a deep sigh of relief, telling myself I had escaped this time. The paper figure had left. I pressed my face against the gap in the window again, just to be sure. But I screamed because through that gap, I saw a face half human, half paper. It was right behind the door, also pressing its face against the gap, looking at me. I fell backward, startled. The other 3, hearing my loud scream, rushed to help me. From outside the door, a voice echoed into the room. "I know you're here. You guys lost the hide-and-seek game." The door burst open, shattering the lock. The paper figure stood outside, witnessed by all 4 of us. It slowly stepped inside. This half-human face, I felt like I had seen it somewhere before. It looked so familiar. It seemed to be the face of the young man in the photo on Madame Mine's altar. It turned out to be her son. The paper figure slowly walked into the room. Lily and Sarah huddled together in a corner, embracing each other, whimpering. I was still sitting on the floor. Tom was speechless, unable to utter a word. The paper figure paid no attention to the others. It only turned to look at me, then advanced towards me. I crawled on the floor, trying to scramble away, but there was no escape. Just as I ran out of options, Tom grabbed a chair and smashed it over the paper figure's head. But the wooden chair shattered, and the figure remained unharmed. It swatted its hand, sending Tom flying out onto the doorstep of the room. He quickly ran towards Madame Mean's room for help. As he reached the door, he saw Madame Mean emerge, holding a thorny branch. She seemed to have anticipated the situation, so without waiting for Tom to speak, she swiftly ran to Lily's door, swung her arm, and lashed the thorny branch across the paper figure's shoulder. It shrieked, then burst through the roof of Lily's room and escaped outside. I was in utter panic, not knowing what to do. Luckily, Madame Mean and Tom came to rescue me. The strange thing was that the paper figure only touched my shoulders with both hands. Its two eyes looked directly into mine, flashing with a blue light. It seemed to have no intention of harming me. At that moment, I had regained my composure. Madame Mean said that it was scared. By the end of this 25th day, it would be forced to return to the underworld and could no longer remain in the paper body. Madame Mean sat down at the table and told us about her family's vocation of making votive offerings. Her name was Mean. Her family had been renowned for their votive offerings since her ancestors' time. The votive offerings made by her paternal grandparents were already famous when they were young. Moreover, her grandfather was a skilled shaman in the village. Her grandmother was adept at crafting highly ingenious and intricate paper animals and human figures. Once, Madame Mean's grandfather was invited to perform a ritual for a district magistrate. Due to his reputation, wealthy and powerful families often invited him to perform land blessing ceremonies or consult on house directions. Sometimes, if a family member died at an inauspicious hour, paper effigies had to be offered and burned as a substitute. This time was different. The district magistrate had a young son, about 8 or 9 years old. No one knew how the child came to fall into the magistrate's rainwater tank and drown. When the magistrate returned home, the entire household was in chaos, unable to find the boy. As the magistrate had been infertile and had prayed at countless temples and pagodas to finally have this son, he loved him dearly. Seeing the entire family frantically searching upon his return, the district magistrate, both worried and furious, dragged a servant girl into the yard and beat her mercilessly with a wooden stick. In his rage, the magistrate struck the stick directly on the servant girl's forehead, cracking her skull. She collapsed, blood gushing from her head, pooling across the yard. Her eyes remained wide and glazed. The magistrate, still not appeased, furiously ordered his household to find his precious son at all costs. But they couldn't, as no one had imagined an 8 or 9-year-old boy would climb into the rainwater tank. 5 days passed, and his son could not be found. The magistrate was distraught, and also regretful for his cruel act after learning that his wife had sent the servant girl to the market that day. That day, the gardener's young son had carried 2 buckets to the tank to fetch water for cooking. As the magistrate's household was fastidiously clean, they had a separate rainwater tank, collecting water from a small gutter. He valued this water tank greatly because cholera was rampant in a country like Annam. He had also adopted Western lifestyles, enjoying cars and hygienic eating. But he still retained the haughtiness, avarice, and cruelty that was customary for high-ranking officials of old. So, it was clear that this magistrate had only partially adopted Western ways. The young boy drew water from the outdoor tank, but a yellowish-black, oily-scummed liquid with a foul smell flowed from the tap. The boy crept carefully to the rainwater tank. He guessed that a rat or cat must have fallen in and couldn't get out, dying there. He had to dispose of it quickly. Otherwise, if the magistrate, in his current grief and anger, were to beat him with a stick like the servant girl the day before, his life would be over. He climbed onto the tank's lid and opened it. An indescribable stench wafted out. The boy scrunched his nose but forced himself to peer inside. However, all he saw was murky black water. He tried to bend down, reaching his hand into the water, searching for the dead animal. But as he focused on his search, a corpse suddenly floated up, its face swollen, eyes bulging, and abdomen looking as if it would burst open with the slightest touch, spewing its organs everywhere. The boy screamed in terror. His face and the corpse's face were less than a hand's breadth apart. Hearing the scream, his father, the gardener, rushed over, followed by many other servants. They pulled the boy out, and then the whole group peered into the water tank. Everyone's faces turned ashen. They ran back to the main house, frantically kneeling and wailing. "Your Honor, the young master, the young master." "What? Where is he? What happened? Speak." "Your Honor, the young master drowned in the rainwater tank." Upon hearing this, the magistrate fell backward, clutching his head and weeping. The servants had to help him up and into the house. Because he loved his son so much, the magistrate purchased a large, precious wooden coffin and wanted to mourn his son for 2 days before burial, even though his son had already been dead for 5 days. That day was the second day of mourning. Madame Min's grandfather was invited to perform a ritual for the soul's salvation and to offer paper figures to serve the young master in the underworld. He placed 3 paper figures in front of the door, lit 3 incense sticks, one at the head of the coffin and the other 2 at the feet of 2 of the paper figures. Why 3 paper figures but only 2 incense sticks at their feet? Because when he died, the eldest son's appearance was too unsightly, so the magistrate wanted to burn a paper figure to give his son a more presentable body, so he wouldn't feel ashamed in the underworld. Thus, there were 3 paper figures, 1 master and 2 servants. While the ritual was being performed, the paper figure intended to replace the young master's body suddenly moved. It jumped onto the coffin lid, throwing the entire funeral into a commotion because a paper figure could walk. The shaman knew the young master's soul had possessed the paper figure. It stared menacingly at the gardener's son and lunged towards him. The shaman quickly grabbed a whip made from a thorny branch and lashed it. The paper figure fell to the ground. He swiftly inserted a golden needle into the paper figure's forehead, then poured lamp oil over it and cursed it. It writhed, and the sound of someone weeping seemed to fill the air. A moment later, the paper figure turned into a pile of black ash. The district magistrate didn't understand what had happened. He only saw the shaman collect the ashes from the paper figure and put them into a jar. Then he turned to the magistrate and said, "Your Honor, that was just a normal exchange ritual. It's done now. I bid your Honor farewell. I'm leaving." The family offered the shaman some sacred offerings. "No, my family must leave now. Please forgive us, Your Honor." "Well, in that case, I won't keep you. Escort the shaman back for me." Leaving the funeral, Madame Min's grandfather finally regained his composure. It was supposed to be over, but dying young, and by drowning, made the young master's soul powerful. It had possessed the paper figure, intending to harm the gardener's son. Luckily, the shaman had managed to pin its soul to the paper figure and burn it to ashes. Thus, the young master's soul was annihilated and could not be reincarnated. As for the shaman, he had committed a grave sin in his profession, and sooner or later, his descendants would suffer the karmic retribution. But he dared not tell the truth to the district magistrate, only lied that everything was settled. In reality, the son's soul had been burned to dust. Madame Min paused here, deep in thought, then said, "My son had to bear the karmic retribution caused by my grandfather. When he was 17, he was on a ferry with his friends. I don't know how he was provoked, but before the ferry reached the other side, he jumped into the river, intending to swim to shore. But after he jumped, his friends never saw him resurface. It took exactly 5 days to find his body. That's why I was so heartbroken that I still call his soul back to possess a paper figure, so I can feel that he's still alive in this world." After hearing her story, I felt deeply sympathetic. I was about to step outside when my head began to spin and I felt dizzy. I fell to the ground, no longer aware of my surroundings. The next morning, when I woke up, I found myself in a dark room. Everything around me was a thick, impenetrable black. A moment later, the surroundings became clearer. This room felt strangely familiar. My arms and legs were unable to move. Then a person walked in. It was Madame Min, followed by another person. The light from outside illuminated the face of the person following her. I was stunned, wanting to scream, wanting to move, but I couldn't. I could only stand and watch because the person following Madame Min was none other than me. More accurately, it was my body. And as I looked down at my own hands, they were the hands of a paper figure. My soul had been swapped. Now I was a lifeless paper figure, while my body belonged to Madame Min's son. They embraced each other, crying for a while, and then Madame Min walked towards me. I felt myself being carried out into the yard. Tom and Lily were both standing there, watching. She declared loudly, "Now I will burn this paper figure, and then your friend will be safe." I wanted to scream, to let them know that I was the real Alex, but it was too late. She lit a fire to my hand. My entire body felt like it was being incinerated. Tom cried out, "Madam, this paper figure is crying."